goes back to the Steve Young, Joe Montana controversy. So what if Steve Young won the job over Joe Montana in the 1988 season? So Bill Walsh trades for Steve Young from Tampa Bay. And Joe Montana was kind of injury riddled, even though he had already won 2 championships. It kind of went out in the playoffs the year before. Figured, okay, I kind of need to plan for the future. Bill Walsh was very strategic. He was just, as a GM and as a coach, he was very good. So coincidentally, kind of like now, he plays them together a little bit in that 1988 season, kind of how Shanahan has been initially staggered Garoppolo and Trey Lance. But the season didn't start out well. They started off 6-5. So Bill Walsh says, okay, this shit isn't working. So he starts Montana permanently for the rest of the year. Montana wins the Super Bowl against Cincinnati, executes the drive, famously to beat Cincinnati. And then they repeat as champions against Denver the following year in a total lopsided Super Bowl. So obviously it worked out. Bill Walsh made the right decision. So no one's objecting that the right thing didn't happen. In this case, we're just exploring what ifs, right? That's the goal here. So my what if is, oh, by the way, if for those that don't know, Montana hurts his elbow in 1991. So just a year after beating Denver, he gets hurt. He doesn't get traded away till 1993 to play for 2 seasons in Kansas City. So my what if is Steve Young comes out hot in the 1988 season. He wins the job from Montana. Montana gets traded to Kansas City earlier. They beat Denver to play the Niners in the Super Bowl in 89. And Joe beats Steve Young because the universe has to function right. Montana still needs to win a Super Bowl that year. So he beats Steve. And then Kansas City wins way before Pat Mahomes in this poetic scenario beats the Niners. But Steve Young goes on to win 2 championships, 1995 and 1996. Thoughts?
So this one, I mean, it's the funny thing is, of course, Joe Montana getting traded to the Chiefs. And, he is for a long time the best quarterback in their franchise history. Maybe Len Dawson or some other guys back in the black and white days. But this is an interesting one because there's some parallels between, the Kaepernick and Alex Smith situation. And then, perhaps now, I mean, definitely not the same with, Jimmy G and Trey Lance, but it seems like the 49ers have a history of having an established quarterback in place and then drafting a young guy who goes out and wins the job. But of course, it didn't work out quite that way for Steve Young. But I think the interesting question is, does this catapult Steve Young as the best quarterback in Niners history? Does he become the standard? Because for a while, Tom Brady's being measured against Joe Montana as the 2 greatest quarterbacks because of everything they've done. And, they're the winning and the rings with all the Z's. So does that catapult Steve Young? Is he the best quarterback in Niners history if he wins the job? And is this winning quarterback in that Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, if he takes Montana's place and wins a couple of Super Bowls instead, that does change the outlook. Montana still has those 2. He ends up winning 3 ultimately. Steve Young wins 4 instead. I think so. Because the Niners have those classic uniforms and that quarterback prestige. And maybe Brady's compared to both of them. I don't know. But we could start a whole other podcast on who is better in this alternate multiverse scenario.
Maybe we could save that for the hot take show. But yeah, I definitely, if that is the case, then Steve Young becomes the measuring stick rather than Joe Montana, and that's an interesting thought for sure.
Yep.
Okay, I did not have that one on my list. So, but it's funny that you went. I mean, you didn't go as far back as I did in the late 70s, but that's, still 30 plus years ago that we're talking about here. So, but yeah, that is an interesting, you guys just have gotten so lucky with your quarterbacks. I mean, you had a lean period in the early 2000s, but it's a pretty remarkable run that, Bill Walsh was able to steal Steve Young away from an incompetent franchise. And I think that's going to be a theme in a lot of our pods here. Is just, good teams, good organizations, just robbing bad ones. And that's exactly what he did.